Play action, Stafford on the move, stops, finds his man, touchdown Williams. Darnold balls out, picked up by Verse, off to the races, and gone for the touchdown. Got his team ready to go. Made the comment, the league did the right thing in terms of keeping the priority and moving the game out of Inglewood here to Arizona, and his team came here ready to play.
The Minnesota Vikings absolutely crap the bed in Arizona as they get blown out by the Los Angeles Rams 27-9. 27-9. Those highlights, of course, brought to you by ESPN. Great broadcast that they had yesterday. They will have another game on ESPN coming up in the next couple of days. It's going to be on Saturday, the Houston Texans taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, if you stayed up like I did and you watched that game, especially the people that are on the East Coast, I feel bad for you, right? Like, that game ended at about roughly 10 o'clock here in El Paso. That's midnight on the East Coast. And it got me thinking about this entire NFL weekend. And to say that the games were kind of disappointing, all of them blowouts except for one. The one game that wasn't a blowout is the Washington Commanders getting the doink that ultimately wins them the game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Right now, it sets up the table of what's going to happen in the divisional round of the playoffs, where you're going to have Kansas City hosting Houston. You're going to have Buffalo hosting Baltimore, which sounds like it should be an AFC championship game, like actual game, but that's just the divisional round, right? And then you've got Philadelphia going to host the LA Rams. Yesterday on the show, we were talking about it, that I thought the Vikings might have had the best chance to beat Philadelphia between the Vikings and the Rams. What I saw yesterday just goes to prove how little we know and how much we kind of want to hedge our bets with our hearts, right? Like, as we're watching this game play out, Linda McGrath over on the Facebook page saying, "Good morning, Tip. Always go with the better quarterback in the playoffs unless your running game is elite. Eagles should be ready for a war." I look at these two teams, and yeah, the Rams started the season pretty bad, right? Like no one really had faith that the Rams were going to be the team to represent the NFC West anyway. Like, everyone thought it was going to be San Francisco's year. And at some point in time, you thought it was going to be Arizona's year. Other people were like, it's going to be Seattle's year. Like, you would just watch as that division kind of turned and turned and turned. And then the last couple of weeks of the season, it winds up being the Rams division. And you look at what the Rams have done over the course of the last half of the year, and they're just about as hot as anyone else is. They have a good quarterback. They have a pretty damn good running game, and they have a good defense. We saw this because they said, Minnesota, we dare you to run the ball against us. And Minnesota couldn't run the ball against them. Now, obviously, there's a difference between Saquon Barkley and Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones, a guy from El Paso, got nothing but love for him, UTEP alum, all that good stuff. But there is a big difference between Saquon Barkley and Aaron Jones. Would the LA Rams be able to do this to the Philadelphia Eagles? And you can't sit back and deny them. You can't say, nah, this team can't do it. We just saw them absolutely throttle a team that won 14 games this year. Augustine saying, I told you about the Rams. I told you about them. And going off to say they just couldn't protect Darnold. Tommy Canazza saying, great morning, Tip. Great morning to you as well, Tommy. I'm sure everyone knows what you are excited about, what you are happy about. We'll get to that subject here in just a little bit. We're covering the Rams' 27-9 win over the Minnesota Vikings. And I got some messages yesterday because the individual who had asked the question the other day about, why do Cowboys fans continue to be Dallas Cowboys fans? that person was a Minnesota Vikings fan, and she writes back and she says, I know. Now I understand why fans continue to stay fans. Or Augustine coming off saying, we're starting off with the tip, LOL. You know the way we do it, buddy. And then Tommy Canazzo throwing me the tomatoes. Yes, I know I mentioned the Philadelphia Eagles. My apologies. I think if this game plays out another way, if this game is a lot closer than what it was, I would have a genuine concern for the Rams playing against the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, granted, I didn't watch a ton of Rams games this year, right? If they're going head-to-head with the Cowboys, guess what I'm watching? I'm watching the Cowboys. Yes, I can have a couple of screens going on at once. I'm still old school. I want to watch just the singular game, right? Like, especially when it's my team. If it's everyone else's team, I don't give a crap, right? I'll put on the red zone, but if my team is on, I am watching every single game, dissecting what's going on. Hell, I write notes. About it. But whenever I watch what happened yesterday with the Rams and the Vikings, if this is a close game, if the Rams just squeak one out, I think to myself, maybe, right? Like maybe there's a slight possibility that they can possibly beat the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm not confident, right? But watching them manhandle the Minnesota Vikings, again, a team that won 14 games this year. I don't care if, as we're watching that game, you're thinking to yourself, holy hell, Sam Darnold is not a great quarterback. That game was not all on Sam Darnold. That game had a lot to do with the team as an entirety just letting themselves down. They couldn't run the ball. The offensive line was bad. Players were dropping passes left and right, and the defense couldn't stop anybody. Hell, me, Augustine, Tommy, and Linda could have put 27 points on the Minnesota Vikings yesterday. It wasn't all Sam Darnold. Yes, he didn't play the best. He could have done better. He should have done better. Whatever. The way the Rams won this game really makes me feel like the Philadelphia Eagles could be in some trouble. Like they could be in some trouble. Obviously, you know me. I don't like the Philadelphia Eagles. I want the Eagles to lose in overtime of the Super Bowl because that is the more gut-wrenching way of losing a game. When you're right there and you can't win it. That to me is the most gut-wrenching way to win a game. I've told people a million times, I'd rather go 0-17 than lose in the GD Super Bowl, simply because there's something about being within a grasp and not really being able to get it that hurts more than knowing I had no shot at all, right? Like if you're right there, you're within a fingertip of being there, and you're not able to get it, that is more heartbreaking than saying, you know what? We had no damn shot anyway. Maybe I'm just a different kind of guy, right? Tommy Canasta saying he's got himself a 2-yard touchdown in him. I know. I got you. We use you in goal line situations. You and Augustine, goal line situations. I've still got a cannon. Lefty quarterback, so we'll see, right? Like I can hand the ball off. I could probably dump it off about 5 yards. All I need is one of you to get, 27 yards of separation, and maybe we'll be able to get something done. Linda McGrath saying Darnold held on to the ball too long, undecided, even completions. The receivers had to make great catches. I don't know about all that. Like the holding on to the ball long, yeah, it served him well all season long. I get that was the narrative that Troy Aikman was going with. You got to just, throw the ball, blah, 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 blah. Look at how many times you saw Justin Jefferson wasn't open. Right? There's even on the very last play that the Rams or that the Vikings had, he hits Jordan Addison in the chest and the ball falls to the ground. It's not always the quarterback, right? We talk about, receivers having a wonderful radius of where they're able to catch the ball. It's not always the quarterback has to put the ball in a perfect place. If the quarterback has to do that, you're going to be in trouble. Justin Jefferson falling out, slipping on a route on a 4th down call. Well, that's your hot route. They're bringing the blitz, so there's literally nothing else you can do. If he falls down and you throw that ball, it's incomplete. or maybe even intercepted. It's more than likely intercepted and ran back for a touchdown. So you take the sack in that case because you've got nowhere else to go to the ball or go with the ball. The one thing that really kind of got me watching that game was I knew that this was going to be the narrative for today, right? Like it was going to be, we need to roast Sam Darnold. Hell, you look at the way the game ended, and you got SVP asking Troy Aikman, oh, what does this do for Sam Darnold's money as we go into the offseason? And Aikman's like, I don't know if you paid the guy, blah, 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 right? It doesn't matter what he did 16 games. It matters the last 2 games. And that to me is absolutely ridiculous. And I know that there are fans out there that are going to think the exact same thing. Like, it doesn't matter what you did in the regular season. It matters what you did in the playoffs. Nobody, absolutely nobody, thought that the Minnesota Vikings would be here. Not when the season started. You cannot look at the way that this season went and say all of the stuff that Sam Darnold did to get the Minnesota Vikings in this position is all just thrown out the window because their offensive line couldn't protect against the Lions and their offensive line couldn't protect against the Rams. The receivers weren't able to get open. Yes, he held on to the ball too long, but that's what you do when your receivers are not open, right? You can't just force a pass in there because I guarantee you, if Sam Darnold gets the ball and he's forcing passes, Troy Aikman's going to say, well, he's forcing passes now. He should hold on to the ball just a little bit longer. We can all sit up here and armchair quarterback all we want, but the fact of the matter is that I still believe Sam Darnold has redeemed himself. Tommy Canazzo saying that defense smothered Sam Darnold. Any quarterback would have struggled against that last night. 100%. I know whenever Aaron Donald retired, everyone thought that the Rams defense was just going to fall off. Everybody thought that defense was just going to take a massive step back because you can't miss a Hall of Fame, first ballot Hall of Fame type player on your defensive line and expect to have the same type of production. The Rams' defensive play calling was elite. Their offensive play calling was elite. They made a 14-win team, and you can say what you want about them, whether or not they deserve to be there, whether or not they were a fraud or whatever. You can say what you want about the Minnesota Vikings, but they made a 14-win team, the LA Rams did, look like they didn't belong in the playoffs. I get it. Right, like I totally understand. I'm not saying that the Vikings and the Sam Darnold and everyone else on the team is above criticism. 100%, they all need to be criticized. But we need to look at the game from the macro and not the micro. This isn't all about whether or not Sam Darnold lost this game. If it's a close game and there's an interception here, maybe I can sit back and say, yeah, that's the reason why, right? The fumble that I showed in the highlight. If that right there is the reason why they lost the game, then yes, I would say that's 100% to blame on Sam Darnold. Whenever you go into the fight and you get your ass kicked, it ain't just one thing that got you your ass kicked. It was an all-around just mollywhopping that happened. The Minnesota Vikings do not need to be criticized the way that they've been criticized by a ton of players, and by a ton of pundits, and by a ton of just random-ass people that are out there that want to crucify Sam Darnold. It's got to suck whenever you're a person like Sam Darnold, who was drafted number 3 overall, was on a team like the Jets that had zero talent around him. Then you go to Carolina and they had zero talent around them. Look at what happened this year with 2 quarterbacks that were in Carolina 2 years ago or 3 years ago, with Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold this year. Look what happens when you actually give them some talent around them, right? You can't say that the 2 games that were played by the Minnesota Vikings as a whole team, where they just got their ass kicked, is all on Sam Darnold. That team allowed all those points. That team got dominated in the last 2 games of the season. It wasn't all Sam Darnold, but we're going to sit here and always blame the quarterback more than we blame anyone else and give the quarterback credit more than we give anyone else. But wins and losses are not a quarterback stat. Sam Darnold deserves a little bit of respect for what he was able to do coming into this season as someone who wasn't supposed to be the starter. Coming into this season, whenever J.J. McCarthy got hurt, who threw like 10 passes total in Michigan, whenever he gets hurt, and people are like, oh no, now they've got Sam Darnold, this team isn't going to win 5 games this year. Las Vegas putting the over-under at 5 games that the Minnesota Vikings were going to win this year, and they win 14. We can't sit back and look at this team and say, oh, they're terrible. Oh my God, they're so bad. Yes, there's going to be a fall off. There always is a fall off. But the Rams, we can't take credit away from them. We can't just want to put the blame on Minnesota. We've got to give the Rams their damn respect. And they went in there and beat the crap out of the Minnesota Vikings. At no point in this game was there ever a question of who was going to win the game. Even whenever the score is 10-3 and you're watching it in the first half, you're thinking to yourself, there is no way in hell Minnesota's going to be able to have the horses to come back from this, because the Rams defense, like Tommy said, was absolutely smothering. They were Waffle House type smothered, covered, and chopped, baby. They were all over the Minnesota Vikings, whether it was in the run game, whether it was in the passing game, whether it was on special teams. They were all over the Minnesota Vikings. They schemed and game planned this game so perfectly that they dominated a 14-win team. You don't see that happen very often. So we got to give them, Sean McVay and them boys, all the love that they want, all the love that they deserve. I did see, though, yesterday that there was a guy towards the end of the game that was on the sidelines for the Rams, right next to their defensive coordinator, and this guy, beach blonde hair, right? Like totally LA. But then he turns around and he's got a just beautiful Hulk Hogan beach blonde Fu Manchu going on. And I had to think to myself, what would it be like to drink with that guy? Because you know that guy, if you are confident enough to be on an NFL sideline working with NFL players, and you've got a beach blonde Fu Manchu, and you're like 285 and 5'10", you've got an enormous amount of confidence that is, 1, earned, and 2, probably deserved, because those players on that sideline would make fun of you relentlessly. And if you can deal with that, you've got to be some sort of confident that no one else gets, right? I want to find this dude. I don't know his name. I got to go through like the whole staff. I'm sure he didn't have that in like the team picture at the beginning of the season. I've got to find this dude, and we are going to have ourselves a party if the Rams make it to the Super Bowl in New Orleans, because that dude on Bourbon Street is going to throw down, and that's a fun-ass time. I sound like a damn alcoholic. I haven't had a beer in 5 hours. I did get my beer box yesterday, though, so I'm going to be recording my new commercial for beer box. Hopefully, it actually works out this time. Had to go through a whole bunch of other stuff that I've got to try to get going on with the with beer box. Remember, everybody, the Tipping Point with Mike Tipton is brought to you by our friends over at RevAutoCarCare.com. That's RevAutoCarCare.com. Use promo code Tipton33. You can save up to 15% on all of your car care needs. I'm all about clean wheels. I've got my package coming in, so that way I can record a video. Clean wheels and ASMR, that's what I am all about. Can't wait to show you all how clean the rims on that Mustang get whenever I clean them with the products I get from RevAutoCarCare.com. RevAutoCarCare.com, promo code Tipton33. All right, Tommy, here we go. News came out yesterday, right after the show ends, that the Dallas Cowboys have parted ways with now former head coach Mike McCarthy. And I've got to sit back and wonder, why not just do it last week? Right? Like why play the game that Jerry Jones was playing and just say, well, we got faith in old Mike McCarthy. He hasn't done anything to lose his job or any of that. And like, I get it. It's a whole like perception thing. Like Jerry Jones is looked at as some sort of monster, and maybe he just doesn't want to be looked at that way anymore. And he's super sensitive about the way that people perceive him and blah, 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 blah. But why the hell wouldn't you just allow him? If it was 6 days later that you were going to walk away from him, what happened between those 6 days where you were like, you know what? We're not going to keep you to the actual full end of your contract by 1 day, but we're also so confident in you that we're not going to allow you to interview with the Chicago Bears and become their possible next head coach. That type of look right there is what gives Jerry Jones such a bad name, right? Because that's not a good look. And I can't sit here and try to be an apologist for it. It's not a good look at all. It's quite a terrible look. If you're going to sit back and say, what was it over the 6-day period that made you solidify your thought process of, you know what? We just can't bring Mike McCarthy back. Nothing could have happened. You didn't lose any games. You didn't lose any players. There wasn't some news article or some scandalous stuff that came out that Mike McCarthy is apparently, Hannibal Lecter or whatever. What the hell happened? That's how this all had to play out. Tommy Canazza saying, I told you, Tip, he was being petty. 100. I agree. It's such a petty move that Jerry Jones did right there that I'm a firm believer, and maybe, they could spin it around because that's what they'll do. You got PR people that are allowed to do that, and I'm good at doing that as well, right? Like, if I'm the Dallas Cowboys PR and people are saying, oh, well, Jerry Jones, this is a bad look for him and blah, 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 I can say, no. What we wanted to do was make sure that Mike McCarthy had all the resources and support that he needed as we found and transitioned him on his way out. We wanted to make sure that we lived up to every single thing that was promised in his contract until he was ready to go ahead and mutually split ways with us. Granted, it took 1 day before the end of his contract took up, but we wanted to make sure that the transition that he had from being a head coach in the NFL to now being unemployed was as smooth as possible. Easy spin. That's what they're going to do. But that's not the damn case. And if you look at the Dallas Cowboys, and I get it, the people on the East Coast, the ones that aren't Cowboys fans, have to be tired of this topic. I apologize. But if you're the Dallas Cowboys and you're Jerry Jones and you've had 30 years of ineptitude and you've had 30 years of just mediocre play, you have to sit back and think to yourselves, we've got to find our way to ingratiate ourselves to a new coach. If I'm a coach and I'm looking at that, at that transition, you didn't let him interview, but you were still going to get rid of him? That's weird, right? Like that's a red flag for me. Red flags just flying up in the air all over. It's not a good look for the Dallas Cowboys. Now, I was on the phone yesterday with Augustine. Called me a little bit after the news came out that the Dallas Cowboys were moving on from Mike McCarthy. We're speaking about this for a bit. And obviously the Dallas Cowboys job is a premier job, right? Like, no matter what happens, if you can tell somebody that you're the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, that's something. That's a flex, right? There's only 32 of these jobs available in the world. So, of course, it still has some cachet to it. That star still means something to a large group of people. So, yes, it's a desirable job. But you look at the candidates that are out there, and you're like, okay, but Mike Vrabel, that was never going to happen because of all the stuff that's going on with New England. It was all set up for Mike Vrabel to just go to New England anyway. Gerard Mayo not getting himself a legitimate chance at being a head coach. And then you get the Rooney Rule stuff that goes along with that. That stuff's just gross to me. Like, if you're going to interview somebody, don't make it like a whole pond type thing. This happens a lot in this industry, especially where you already know who it is that you're going to hire, but they have to put the job posting out there, and then they have to do X amount of interviews. And I've been on that receiving end of, I'm more qualified than somebody else, but because I'm not the person they wanted to hire, they interview me and they waste my effing time. I hate when they do that to NFL caliber head coaches, right? Byron Leftwich. Sure, he was out of the NFL this past season. He wasn't coaching anywhere. But just to bring someone like Byron Leftwich in so that you can say, look, I interviewed a black guy, that's gross. Get rid of the damn Rooney Rule and just let them say, look, I wanted to have Mike Vrabel. Gerard Mayo did a pretty damn good job. Not good enough. We're going to get Mike Vrabel. And then no one, I don't think anybody would be upset at that, right? Like, it sounds bad, but I'd rather it sound bad than be just a sham, right? Like, because it's grotesque to me, at least. Like I don't like the fact that we're going to have sham interviews for people. Brian Flores was talking about this in his lawsuit against the NFL, and it just happened twice this week, right? Like, how is this something that's not going to get fixed? Off my soapbox. My apologies. Tommy Cananza saying, once he figured out that he wasn't going to be able to sign him, he fired him a day before his contract expired. That is petty AF. It is. And like, no matter what I try to do, I cannot defend it. I don't want to defend it. Again, I don't think Mike McCarthy is a terrible head coach. I really don't. I look at what the Dallas Cowboys had on their roster, and I am surprised he got this many wins, right? Obviously, the season didn't go the way that you thought it was going to go, but it's the GM's job to get him the best players and maximize the roster given the salary cap and XYZ, right? We all know that stuff. So now that Mike McCarthy's out of a job, I don't think he's going to be out of a job very long. I genuinely don't. I feel like someone's going to hire him, or he's going to be on TV because the man knows football. Tommy Cananza saying, are the rumors, let me read that again. I do have a weird bit of dyslexia. It's super weird because I think I figured this out as an adult, right? Like, some words move around on me. It's a weird thing. So, are the Dion rumors just to satisfy the Rooney Rule? In the history of the Dallas Cowboys, there have not been any black head coaches. I'm trying to go through. No, there hasn't. This would be the 9th, I believe, head coach that Jerry Jones has had since 1989, which isn't a lot of turnover. It's a number that's out there that people on ESPN want people to know, right? But I don't think it's a Rooney Rule thing. And for those that don't know what the Rooney Rule is where you have to, by law, it's also the C-League rule in Major League Baseball, you have to, by law, interview a minority for your head coach or GM positions, but you have to interview one, just one, right? Yeah, it's grotesque, right? Like, anyway, again, we'll move on from that. That's just what the Rooney Rule is. You have to interview one minority head coach, manager, GM position, whatever. But I don't think that that's necessarily the case. And I was talking about this yesterday with Augustine, was about, like, who would the future head coach of the Dallas Cowboys be? And we, listed off a couple of names. He wanted someone like in the McVay line. He was talking about the Cincinnati Bengals defensive coordinator, just people like that, right? I brought up the name Marcus Freeman, and then I thought to myself, why not Dion? Because in order to be the head coach in Dallas, you have to be able to deal with Jerry Jones, deal with the media, and not give a damn about your perception to anybody. And that fits Deion Sanders. And I will say this, Deion Sanders is a hell of a coach. We've seen it, right? Like what he was able to do at Jackson State, what he was able to do in Colorado. He's a good coach. He's a good motivator. That's what you need. You need someone who's not going to be like, I'm the focal point of everything. I'm going to call the offense. I'm going to call the defense, whatever. I am just here to make sure everyone else is doing their darn job, as Deion Sanders would say. I like the possibility of the Dallas Cowboys signing Deion Sanders as their new head coach. Would Deion leave Colorado? And I think, yes, the answer is yes. I think he's a mercenary, right? Like, you go wherever the most money is because that's when you capitalize on who you are. You will never be more valuable than what you are now. Same thing with Ben Johnson, right? Like Augustine and I were talking on the phone about this. He's like, why would you leave Detroit if you're Ben Johnson? Because you've seen recently, with recent memory, what happens if you stay with a team too long as an offensive coordinator, right? You're going to start having pieces plucked out of your system. It's going to happen. It's an inevitability. You cannot sign and run it back with everybody every single year. Those pieces are going to be pulled out of the Detroit Lions. That's exactly what happened with Eric Bieniemy. Great offensive mind for so many years, but just couldn't get a head coaching position. Stayed with the Kansas City Chiefs, won his Super Bowls, did all that, but now his value has absolutely tanked. If you are Ben Johnson, you maximize where you are in your value, and you go from there. That's what Deion Sanders should do. That's what Deion Sanders is more than likely going to do. Colorado is going to have to pay him a buttload more money than what they already are in order to keep him. Why? Because he is a mercenary. Everyone in sports are mercenaries outside the owners. I guarantee you, your favorite player right now, if they were on your favorite team and someone offered them a buttload of money to go literally anywhere else, guess what they're doing? They're going anywhere else. Augustine saying, are you talking to me? Of course I'm talking to you. Tommy Canazza going on to say, I don't like it. I think Sanders is fine as a college coach. Kids will run through a wall for him. I'm not sure grown men would. I think there's a difference in how you approach college and the pros, right? And no one would know that better than Deion Sanders. And I'm a firm believer in Deion Sanders will be able to tell these guys, look, man, at the end of the day, it's about money, right? You can be good or you can be great, but you can also get paid a ton more money if you're hustling, if you're doing the small things like that, right? And that message resonates to people from someone like Deion Sanders more than it would from Mike McCarthy, right? Like, I think that that's what it is. You have to try to maximize your young contracts, your new incoming contracts. Going up to people like Jalen Guyton or Tyler Guyton, rather, and being like, look, I got no problem moving on from an offensive lineman that was drafted number 1 overall. I did it with 5 stars all the time. Tyler Guyton's right out of college. That would resonate with him. Like, you better start working that ass off, dude, or else you ain't going to get paid. And we can move on from you in a heartbeat. You're just a draft pick. We've got other offensive linemen that can come in here and play. And it's a bad look for an offensive lineman to be giving up on that early, right? Like if Deion Sanders were to come in, I feel like that would be his way of coaching is I'm going to talk to the players like they're players. As a guy that used to be a player. There's something about that that's a little different than whenever you got someone like Mike McCarthy, who's a lot older, who's very, we can say this, he's very reserved, right? Like, you don't see emotional outbursts from Mike McCarthy on the sideline. And I think that you need someone who's the exact opposite of what you just had as a coach. I feel confident saying this, that Deion Sanders would be the exact opposite of Mike McCarthy. I don't see them. I don't look at them as similar dudes, right? Like, I feel like you've got to have that type of change, that kind of shock to the culture. Now, I don't believe Deion Sanders would be a long-term coach with the Dallas Cowboys. Like, I can't see him having a 10-year career per se for the Dallas Cowboys, but I can see him being a coach that's there long enough to help transition or even grow. And if you can keep him there for an extended period of time, then sure. But no one knows better how to deal with the monster that is Jerry Jones than Deion Sanders does. He was there as a player. He's been on, various media outlets talking about how much he loves Jerry Jones and how Jerry Jones has done XYZ for him. All the players that love Jerry Jones. And I think that that's what you need is you need a guy that's vocal, that's willing to say, I don't care what you're saying. You got to have people like that are there for your team. Tommy Cananza saying, I want Ben Johnson, Bobby Slovic, a young offensive coordinator with a fresh and up-to-date playbooks, preferably someone who comes from the Kyle Shanahan or Sean McVay tree. I think that's so weird that Sean McVay is younger than most of the people watching this show right now, listening to this show right now, and already has himself a coaching tree. That's insane to me. But you've got to always, I guess, look at what it is that you would need as a team, right? And I think that with the Dallas Cowboys, you've just come off of two head coaches that are very offensive minded that you had for a grand total of, I want to say, a little over 12 years now with Jason Garrett and with Mike McCarthy. And it hasn't worked. Normally, the way this goes is you go offensive coach, defensive coach, offensive coach, defensive coach, offensive coach, defensive coach, and you just keep the wheels a churning whenever you have that kind of turnover, right? Like not every team is as stable as the Pittsburgh Steelers are, where you've had three head coaches since 1969 or whatever. But that's normally how it goes, offensive to defensive. Like we've got to have a different mindset and stuff like that here. I believe if you got someone like Deion Sanders, then you can go out and not have to worry about getting someone who's going to do both jobs as head coach and offensive coordinator. I feel like you can go get someone like a Cliff Kingsbury, who I like. I love me some Cliff Kingsbury. Don't look at the Texas Tech flag in the back. Look here at me, right? Like, I love me some Cliff Kingsbury, and I think that his offenses are innovative. The last time the Arizona Cardinals were relevant, Cliff Kingsbury was their head coach. He was getting the most out of DeAndre Hopkins and the most out of Kyler Murray, the undersized quarterback who's maybe 5'1", right? Like, I would like to see him. Plus, you're taking him away from the Washington Commanders. That would make me so happy. I would like to see him under just a guy that's there to be the coach, not someone else who's there to do multiple jobs, because I feel like that does get overwhelming at times. But you bring him in as an offensive coordinator, a Cliff Kingsbury or someone like that. You're not going to be able to make Ben Johnson move as an offensive coordinator. But if you can just have a guy who's a head coach to be a head coach like Deion Sanders, then why wouldn't you? And then we're looking at what's coming into the league right now, right? Maybe I'm just an a-hole, and I've got no problem saying that. But if Deion Sanders becomes the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, who is out there to say that you have someone like Travis Hunter who wouldn't just strong-arm the NFL to do what we've seen what we saw Eli Manning and John Elway do in the past? Why wouldn't? Why couldn't he? Why don't we see that as something feasible? Where he says, I'm not going to go to that team. I want to go to the Dallas Cowboys. If you draft me, I'm going to hold out, and I'm going to go to the Dallas Cowboys. Tommy Cananza saying, I have zero interest in Cliff Kingsbury or Kellen Moore. I'm with that as well. I think Kellen Moore had his time, but you know what it is. Augustine saying it would be a bigger circus than ever. But that's the thing, right? That's what makes the Dallas Cowboys. I get that people hate whenever, it's the Dallas Cowboys that dominate the news cycle. But Deion Sanders being the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, it's going to be just an unrelenting cycle of this is who we're going to focus on. And I believe that Deion Sanders being there, and maybe it's just me thinking about things like maybe. So for those that don't know, I do have a bit of a background in psychology. I wanted to be a psychologist when I first got out of the Air Force because the human mind is amazing to me, right? So I do have a lot of schooling to go with psychology. I came back to UTEP and I threw all of that away so that I can do media, which was a horrible, horrible mistake in hindsight, right? But I still look at it from like that type of viewpoint of things. I wanted to do sports psychology and talk about sports issues that have to pertain to the area of PTSD. We were talking about Robert Griffin III yesterday. I am a firm believer that he had in his mind, because you saw the way that he changed the way he played, some form of PTSD from what it was that he had to deal with the Washington Commanders whenever he had to do all that stuff, right? I believe that if you bring in someone like Deion Sanders to the Dallas Cowboys, he becomes basically a human shield and stops a lot of the noise that you hear in the background, right? A lot of the is Dak the guy. A lot of the is this team held together. A lot of these things, because I know that Deion Sanders won't stand for that nonsense. He'll hear someone bring out a rumor and he'll say, that's stupid. Why are we even talking about this stuff? No, that's flat out a lie. Now, whether or not he's lying about it is a completely different story. But the fact that he would be that type of coach, that he would be that type of individual to sit back and become the meat shield for the rest of the team, because we are talking about a different type of player now. Players that are all over social media, players that are all over, the internet or the news cycle, ESPN, waiting to hear what happens with them in the news. And I think that if you have someone like Deion Sanders who would come out and say, whenever there's questions about his quarterback, that he would fight for his quarterback and say, no, what you're talking about is just flatly wrong. No, that's dumb, right? Where you don't have that right now with a guy like a Mike McCarthy, who's not going to stand up for his players. All season long, whenever you heard that there was rifts in the Dallas Cowboys locker room, it would be addressed, and Mike McCarthy would just be like, right? Deion Sanders would address that stuff and say no, right? Like there's something about knowing that your leader has your back that makes you fight for them more. And I think that that's what Deion Sanders would bring to the Dallas Cowboys if he became their head coach. Going back over to the comment section, Dallas needs a serious head coach. Define serious. Because if you're going to tell me Bill Belichick, I'll say that Bill Belichick wasn't taken as a serious head coaching candidate until he won 6 Super Bowls. Right? Look at Bill Belichick's life prior to being the coach of the Patriots. There were still questions about Bill Belichick whenever he was the coach of the Patriots, especially early on. You can't say someone's a serious coach unless you're talking about personality-wise, right? But they just had that. Mike McCarthy was that. Mike McCarthy was a no-nonsense, serious type coach. I think Deion Sanders is that same type of mindset of, I have no nonsense. I'm just going to be more vocal about it. And if you need me to, I will be the meat shield for these players. Tommy Canasta says, we need help offensively. This offense was horrible last season. To get those guys, you got to offer them head coaching jobs. OC jobs would be lateral moves, and their current teams wouldn't allow it. Then goes on to say Deion Sanders would make the headlines, and we all know that's what Jerry really wants. I think it's a real chance it happens. I don't like it, though. Again, I'm all about just, I don't know if it was offensive help that the Dallas Cowboys needed. I don't know if it was defensive help that the Dallas Cowboys needed. Yes, there were so many injuries on that team, and yeah, there's going to be a ton of turnover on that roster. That's going to make it a little more difficult. Like next year, I'm a firm believer that next year, Tommy, is going to be more than likely worse? Question mark. I don't want it to be, but it's more than likely going to be that way for the Dallas Cowboys. But Deion Sanders being that coach, I don't see anything wrong with it, right? And if you're wanting, someone else as an offensive coordinator, you want some different change in offense, why not give someone else a shot, right? Like Bobby Slovic and Ben Johnson and Cliff Kingsbury didn't get shots based off of whatever. Like they had to work their way up there. Cliff Kingsbury, as a Texas Tech fan, I had to watch the Cliff Kingsbury offense in Texas Tech. And yes, it was ran masterfully by Patrick Mahomes. But I'm a firm believer in you got to let people do what their job is, right? If you're a head coach and you're also the offensive play caller, it makes it so much more difficult for you to be the head coach because it's so hard to do both. If you have two very important positions, you have to dedicate more time to one than the other, and the other one starts failing a little bit, right? Tommy Consa going on to say Mike McCarthy was a donut-eating fool, and they couldn't score in the red zone to save their lives. I don't think that's game planning. I think that's talent. Right? Like the offensive line for the Dallas Cowboys was getting bullied all year long. It's so like whenever the defense can clamp up on you a little bit more like they do in the red zone, it's going to be so much harder to score. You like talent is always going to, the Macho Man thing. The cream rises to the top, brother. Right? Like that's what it is. I think that the Dallas Cowboys have, especially along the offensive line, a talent disparity that we weren't used to seeing because the Dallas Cowboys had an amazing offensive line for so long. Augustine's saying too old. I'm assuming we're talking about maybe the Belichicks and the people that are out there. But I want to know, like, what is the definition of a serious coach, right? Because I feel like you don't know what a serious coach is until you give someone the opportunity, right? Like, and then sometimes you get the serious coach that's just not there anymore. Bill Parcells with the Dallas Cowboys, right? Like, that shouldn't have ever happened. Tommy Cananza saying, I wouldn't mind getting a young, fresh offensive coordinator. I don't have any confidence in Jerry finding them. I think that's true. Tommy, I think we're going to agree to disagree on this. That's game planning and play calling 100%. Maybe. But I also believe in the red zone, that's where the talent separation begins, right? Especially in the red zone. Look at the defense. The defense couldn't stop anyone in the red zone, right? So it's not just an offensive problem. The biggest issue that the Cowboys had over the last couple of years was they couldn't stop the run. You don't have a good running defense. And I think that that's still the issue that they have with Mike Zimmer as their defensive coordinator. Augustine saying it doesn't matter who the coach is in Dallas until Jerry Jones goes away. And going on to say Scotty Walden, the UTEP head coach right now for the Dallas Cowboys. I could understand. It's deserved, right? Like the doubting of Jerry Jones is deserved and earned. He's done it time and time again. 9 head coaches since 1989. We're looking at 36 years each. So the coaches are getting an average of 4 years to coach. But we're also talking about times like Chan Gailey and interim head coaches that were there for just like Dave Campos that did like 2 years of time with the Dallas Cowboys that really tank that average, right? But there's a part of me that wants to believe what Augustine just said right now of it's so hard to believe in the Dallas Cowboys whenever they have the specter of Jerry Jones hanging over the shoulder of whoever the next head coach is going to be. But I think if you're the head coach, you kind of believe that time, and I know this sounds morbid, and I feel so bad saying this, but you kind of feel that time is on your side, right? Like Jerry Jones is 82 years old. Do we really think that he'll be around like another 5 to 10 years? Like I hope I'm not, guys, serious face. I'm not saying that I think that Jerry Jones is going to die in the next 10 years. What I'm saying is the probability of it happening for an 82-year-old man that eats freaking McDonald's every morning for breakfast and drinks a ton of Johnny Walker Blue, that it's more than likely increased the probability of longevity not being on his side, right? So maybe, just maybe, if I'm a coach, I'm thinking I'm more than likely going to be here longer than him. Now, there's a possibility that he's like Rick Pitino and Jerry Jones is a vampire like Rick Pitino. There's that small possibility. I just don't see it. In the words of Talladega Nights, 98% of us are going to die at some time. So, I mean, Jerry Jones isn't going to outlive whoever the next coach is for the Dallas Cowboys. Or maybe he does. Maybe the coach gets fired within a year. Who knows, right? But that's what's going on for the Dallas Cowboys. Okay. I spent more time on that subject than I wanted to. Again, I apologize to the people that watch on the East Coast. I would love to get some feedback from y'all. I'm pretty sure it's going to be stop talking about the Dallas Cowboys, but I'm sure you know, right? Like, I'm a little different than some of the other shows that are on the National Streaming Sports app, where we are live on Roku currently right now. And I know that a lot of the shows are fan-led shows. I try to be a little more broad and give you a perspective that's not the fan type of perspective, right? Like, I can be a fan and separate my fandom from reality. And the reality just happens to run concurrent most of the time with my fandom, because I don't want to say I'm pessimistic, but I'm very realistic, especially when it comes to the Dallas Cowboys, especially when it comes to professional sports, right? I was talking about this yesterday. I was told by Cynthia Russell, she had asked a question about the Dallas Cowboys fans. Why do they stick with the Dallas Cowboys? As she's a Minnesota Vikings fan who just watched her team lose in a very, very unceremonious way. And I've always been with the mindset of, once every 32 years, your team should win a championship. If this was utopia, it's obviously not. So there's going to be variations in when this happens. But I always take solace in knowing that you are going to lose more times than you will win the championship. That is just history. That is a fact. I mean, we can talk about it for every damn sport that's out there. The last 20 years, the Patriots won 6 Super Bowls. That means they didn't win 14 of them. The New York Yankees have won 27 World Series. That means they haven't won 120 of them, or whatever, however far back the number goes for the World Series. I want to say it's more than likely 120. So then that means that the New York Yankees haven't won 93 of the other World Series that are out there. You are not going to win the championship every year. Utopia, once every 32 years. It's more than just that. That's always my mindset whenever it comes to sports. Now, I hope and pray, I really do hope and pray that the Dallas Cowboys win another championship in my lifetime, because I would like to see my kids actually see the Dallas Cowboys win a championship. Like, if they win the championship next year, which they won't, but if they win the championship next year, I can die a happy man. I'm good. Because that means my kids got to see it, and now they've got to worry about their kids becoming Dallas Cowboys fans and hating themselves. Augustine saying, isn't the show now 2 hours? That'll start again a little bit later on this month. I've got to start working out some different things. I'm working on imaging, working on sales. I need to find a salesperson. That's one thing I know that's going to help out me 1,000,000%. I've got to find myself a salesperson, but that'll be happening within the next couple of weeks. Augustine, my apologies on not giving you more tip. Phrasing? No, I was done on purpose. But the good news is, though, that the show is now 5 days a week on National Streaming Sports. We were just Monday through Thursday. They made a huge mistake. Augustine saying, why would you let your kids be Cowboys fans? I didn't let them. I even said it a million times. Like, I'm not going to force the Dallas Cowboys upon them. I don't want them to live this lifestyle. I don't want my kids to be just hating life whenever they watch football. But they just turned out that way. Like, Jericho doesn't even really care about football. He just cares about the Dallas Cowboys. He asked me again. He's like, are the Cowboys going to play this week, right? Because 12 years old, you don't really understand how the season works. I was like, nah, buddy, the season's over for them. They didn't make the playoffs, this and that. And he looks at me, he's like, why didn't they make the playoffs? I was like, well, they just weren't good enough this year. He's like, well, why not? Like, they just weren't, buddy. Like, I don't know how to explain this to you. He's like, huh. They better get better. Yes, sir. We'll make sure that happens. I didn't let him. He chose. Augustine, he chose. I didn't force him to be a Cowboys fan. I wouldn't force that on anybody. I hate that I love them. That shirt's got to be coming out sometime soon. I've already paid people for it. And I will say that, yeah, like it's better than any one of those people that jump around from team to team doing all that stuff. Like, oh, I used to like the Rams whenever Kurt Warner was there, but then I became a Patriots fan because of Tom Brady. And now I want to be a Kansas City Chiefs fan because I think Patrick Mahomes is great. Hint, hint, hint. One of these guys. Oh, man. Whew, I remember hearing that. Old team jumping Augustine over here. I just want to be a front runner. Ho, ho, ho. But again, got to get this out before the show ends. We are on 5 days a week now on National Streaming Sports on their Roku channel. So download Roku and download the National Streaming Sports app. It's their fast channel. It'll put on all the stuff that we've got that's going on with National Streaming Sports 5 days a week now. It was only Monday through Thursday. They've given me Friday, which is a huge mistake, National Streaming Sports. But you know what? I'm happy with it. And if you're happy with it, then everybody's happy with it. And that's really all that matters. Okay, I wanted to try to talk a little bit about the NFL playoffs and what we've got going on. I don't think that we're going to be able to get to that, so I'm just going to hit this topic real quick, which is about the NBA. I'm sitting back, I'm watching, the NFL on one channel, and I'm watching the beginning of the Lakers and Spurs game on my phone. And as I'm watching this game, I just keep getting these hits from ESPN. LeBron James did this to Wembanyama. Anthony Davis did this to Wembanyama. You would have thought that the Lakers were just dominating the Spurs. And the Spurs won 126 to 104. An utterly dominating performance by the San Antonio Spurs. And it just goes to let you know that you can't believe everything that you see in just little itty-bitty headlines. You got to dig in and get yourself some context. Food for thought for what we're going to talk about tomorrow. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for tuning into today's show. Remember, we'll be back tomorrow, 8 o'clock Mountain Time, 10 o'clock Eastern, right here on the Tipping Point with Mike Tipton, as we are live with National Streaming Sports on their Roku channel. We will see you all tomorrow.